about your place too.
Can you hear me now?
No.
You don't want to hear me.
Can't hear you still.
We want to welcome you all today to this time of remembrance for Ed Holcomb. And we appreciate your presence. The ladies have provided lovely refreshments. And Ed, unknown to himself, provides us with all the wine back there, 14 different bottles of it, of all kinds, shapes, and size and descriptions, so there's no reason why we can't have a good time today. Now, you know, Ed was a loyal and faithful husband to his beloved Bobby, and he was a supporting father and a caring and considerate relative and friend, and a dedicated member of the community which we call Silver Glen. And he moved out onto the universe a few days ago, and he has entered into a wholly unknown state where there is no suffering as we know it, and none of the trials and the tribulations of this world. It's a time of peace and a time of comfort, a time of rest and a time of joy. A time of answers instead of questions. A time of assurance instead of anxiety. A time of meaning instead of mystery. A time for the body to be the spirit and for the soul to soar to exquisite new heights. A time for which we are all born and into which none of us can enter except through death. And so we are here then to pay our respects to the memory of Ed and certainly to mourn his passing. But more importantly, we are here to joyfully celebrate his life. And we are glad that he is relieved now of his pain and incapacitation. Now, you know, to me, I always thought that Ed was the father of this community.
Yes.
Because every time somebody wanted to know something, where did they go? Ed Holcomb. And who had the answers? Ed Holcomb. And there was very seldom a time when you went to him that he didn't have an answer. One time I had a chance to ask him a question that he didn't know the answer to, and I was sort of proud of myself. I'm like, how in the world did I fall upon this? Right there above you at the ceiling, there was a conduit that brought down the electricity from May Library House. And when it got down here, it didn't meet the conduit that was here to be receiving it. And so they had to put a flexible S on that conduit. And when we tore out the walls, we had a wonderful time sending that over through the ceiling and down the outside wall, and it worked all right in the end. Now, I think that Ed is really the father of this community. And he knows more about more things than I even knew existed. And he was here at the very beginning. He was here when the building was built. He was here when they formed the board. And he was numerous times the president of this board. And that is no dear job to have. Details after detail. He was a walking encyclopedia. He knew about the policies and the procedures and the history, and there was never a time when he didn't have an answer. When Dan Wilson, who was our project manager, came into some problems, he would say, "Where's Ed?" And I would say, "Over there." And so he would find Ed, and he would get the answers that he needed. Excuse me. Now, I want to tell you a little story. There were two friends who were walking through the desert. And during some point in the journey, they had an argument, and one of the friends slapped the other in the face. And the one who got slapped was hurt, but without saying anything, he wrote in the sand, "Today, my best friend slapped me." And they kept walking until they found an oasis in the desert, and since it was so hot and stuffy, they decided they would take a swim and get a little cleanliness in their body. And when the guy who had been slapped got in the water, he started to flounder, and it looked like he was drowning. And his friend came in and he saved him. Earlier, when he had been slapped, he wrote in the sand, "My best friend slapped me." And then when his best friend saved him, he wrote on a stone, "My best friend saved me." Now, when someone hurts us, we should write it down in sand, and where the winds of forgiveness can blow it away. But when someone does something good to us, we have to engrave it in stone and be appreciative. Learn to write your hurts in the sand and your wonderful gifts in the stone. Ed was the kind of a person who indeed was a blessing to us because he wrote to us innumerable times in stone. Now there are several people who have agreed to chat today about Ed, and we're going to call on them in just a minute, but I want to make sure you understand the significance of their speaking. When Robert Louis Stevenson was a little kid, he was very ill, as you probably know. And at nighttime he was bored, and he would go and open the shade to his room and he'd look out. And he lived in the time when they didn't have any electric lamps, but they had oil lamps. And the lamplighter would come down the road, and he would have his ladder, and he'd go to each post, and when he did it, he would light that lamp and then go on to the other. And the nurse came in one night and she said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm watching the lamplighter when he lights the lamp." And so what's that to do with you? He said, "Well, it shows us that he has put a light in the darkness. And every time he moves to a new lamp, he makes enough light." And I believe that the greatest tribute that any of us could make would be to have someone say to us that in our lives we have left behind a light that has brought some light into the darkness, whether the darkness be sadness or comfort for the sick, or whether it brought some happiness to those who near us. In the case of Ed Holcomb, he brought us all the answers that we needed, and we are eternally grateful to him. So today, we're going to have some people chat with you, and the first is going to be Patsy Brown. Are you here, Patsy?
Yes.
Oh, here she comes.
Ed Holcomb was our first Silver Glen Board president. Are you?
Hold that down for you.
Oh, that's swell. Thank you. There were 175 original members. Therefore, a good number of them were men. Being selected to head up Silver Glen showed a great faith in Ed. Everything was new and challenging. We inherited a temporary program to run on. It had nothing to do with what we needed. Ed worked on it for over 20 years and finally got it to apply to our cooperative. He got it right from the beginning, meticulously saving all the blueprints and records. It was just the detail man that we needed. He educated us with his articles in the Silver Bulletin. Think about it. He served 3 times as president. Bobby has been an amazing supportive wife in all ways. Ed came to us with a cane, and through the years, his post-polio put him in a wheelchair, but that never stopped him from serving Silver Glen. We have much to thank him for, and for Bobby, who always was there supporting his dedication to us. I know he was 65 when he moved in, because we went to high school together, and he was a year ahead of me, so I was 64, so. He died at 89.
This thing I've been told, the market to you.
Okay, that's fine, okay.
You can just sit on your chair.
was sitting there for all.
No, that's fine. Okay, yeah. I first met Ed in the 1960s at the Boeing Company in a group known as Product Assurance. That's a group of people that work between the airlines and the designers to deal with special concerns about reliability, safety, and maintainability. And I'd come from a design group in air conditioning. Ed had come from being a tech rep on the KC-135 program. That was the beginning of the jet commercial transport era too. And our first 707 was the derivative of the 135, and as some of you know, the Dash 80. Now, one of the main things that product assurance group does is to collect data, especially trouble reports from the airlines, and so they can find out things they need to do better on the next airplane. And so Ed had a big knowledge of computers, and also from him being a tech rep, he knew airplanes pretty well. And so he became the leader of a group that processed all this data from the airlines into computers, so the rest of us could do reliability studies and help pick out the best parts for the airplane. So the next time you people go flying, if you're in a Boeing airplane, remember to give thanks to Ed, because he was definitely one of those people that make airplanes like Boeing makes the best in the air. Now, when I came to this place here about 10 years ago, Ed was also one of the first people I met. There's quite a few other people from Boeing are here too, as you probably know. And so you already heard about how he was involved with Barbara on being founding members. And I think founding meant two things. The first thing was to find this place, because I could never find it, even after I moved in here for the few times. And now that I take a taxi about half the time, they never can find it either. So I want to thank Bobby especially and Ed for getting this place started and being on the board. And like both of, well, especially Tim has said, I took my turn as the president one year, and now we're in the 20s. That means there's about 20 of you out there that also have been president. You know that lots of things come up that you don't really know what to do. So I called Ed many, many times. And one of the reasons was that sometimes there's kind of legal things came along, and you know, if you call a lawyer, they always want to send you a bill afterwards. But Ed never did that. He was just always so willing to help. So once again, I want to express my thanks to Barb and Ed for making this place such a wonderful place that we can all enjoy.
Kaylee?
Thank you. Ed Holcomb was my hero because of his dedication and love for Silver Glen. He was a highly intelligent Silver Glen historian. He treated me as an equal, and he opened his heart to Neil and me. In 2016, after we moved into Silver Glen, Neil and I worked with Ed to archive 20-some years of records. During our first meeting, I showed him the record archive guidelines I put together. He examined it and said, "I'm impressed already. What a positive reinforcement." For 6 weeks, we worked together almost every day. Most days, he was in the social room before us, even though it usually took him 2 hours every morning to get ready. Ed patiently and systematically introduced Silver Glen to us, always precise and courteous. With all his success and accomplishment, Ed told me once, with a big smile on his face. His proudest life achievement was winning Bobby's heart by robbing her cradle. That was my Ed.
Now, some of these people have volunteered to speak, but if anybody else wants to join in the party, feel free. We're going to go to the ones who have already said they're coming. I see Maylon is ready to chat.
Well, actually, I'm very unhappy because, Tim, you stole my thunder.
What?
Yeah. I also think that Ed could be called father of Silver Glen. Some of you may not realize that in our 24-year history, Ed was not only our first president, but he served as president of the board for 10 years. And that means a whole decade of demanding work, which any past board president can attest to, even though we served much shorter terms. The president, remember, has to create an agenda that deals with personnel matters, with the urgent concerns of all the committees, with spending our money wisely, and with keeping everything within established policies and procedures. Those are the big items, but countless problems of all kinds keep coming up, including trying to make all of us residents happy, or at least informed. And that's a significant responsibility. And Ed took that responsibility seriously. He also had the genius for writing most of the essential documents for governing our cooperative. Of course, they've been revised as we have evolved, but his keen interest and skill started us off on a strong footing. We owe him a huge debt of gratitude for giving so much of himself to the Silver Glen that we call home. And we appreciate his wife, Bobby, too, for her encouragement and devotion.
Jean, I think you're next. Jean arranged this whole operation, so come on up and have your say, darling. You.
Now, I hope you can hear me, and if you can't, hold up your hand.
Get real close to it.
I thought we were going to have the little fellow carry it around. All right, I'm certainly glad I didn't write gripping long notes, because you all said the things we're supposed to be saying here and want to say here. But I have a little Ed story that many of you have already heard, and I think it's so typical of Ed, because when I got on the board, I went to him immediately. I had been watching him ever since I moved into Silver Glen, and he always had the answers. He always had the intelligence, and I just liked and respected him a great deal. So when I got on the board, I immediately went to Ed, and I said, I need your help. I've been to the finance committee. I know all about dining room, but I don't know about all these other things. Well, if you go to Ed with that open mind and maybe low IQ, you really have issues. You get to know him really well, because all he did was ask me questions to lead me down the line to the answer. And I learned a lot, and I spent a lot of time with Ed, and I looked at him as just I looked at him as a teddy bear, because he was just so kind. But he would never give me an answer outright. I really had to work for it. And sometimes it took a while. But I also think that each person here is here as a result of having had Ed really as the founder, setting the goals, setting the values for all of us. And I think that we are so fortunate to be in this wonderful facility with all of us as a community, all working together. I know that we have two presidents here, May and Art, but I would like to have anyone who's been on the board here at Silver Glen either to stand or hold up their hand. Hold up your hand. I want to add that being on the board is a privilege. It's a privilege that takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, a lot of frustration, and I think every board will say that they work the hardest of any board. They will say it took more time than they ever expected, but you have to remember that it is a privilege. I think we also have to remember that the basis for Silver Glen are the committees, committee chairmen, and those that participate in everyday functions. I would like all of those that fill in that category to hold up their hands, please. And I hope all of you do. Committees, chairpersons, anybody who contributes here at Silver Glen. Because it takes everybody, and it takes everybody to build a community. Now, all of you have finished all these wonderful things that I was going to say, but I also found it really interesting because I know that I want you to hear this, people. Ed went to the hospital twice, just recently. And the first time, I think he had some unfinished business because he came home and went back shortly thereafter. And I was told by somebody who could not come today that he received an email from Ed during this little time he was home and said something like, "The process is great. Do not change the MTV." I think that is it. I also want to read to you what we had by the flowers. This arrangement to honor Ed Holcomb is a collection of plants from our garden. He nurtured Silver Glen as a gardener cares for his or her precious plants. Ed serves as president of the board for several terms, and we are indebted to him for laying a foundation for what Silver Glen is today. And I know he will be missed. Maybe I could give a plug. My unit is still for sale.
I think that's all the people that I have on my list. Are there others who would like to say?
Oh, here.
Well, step right up and have yourself. Come on, Jackie.
Just pass that thing around. Oh, I thought they had a
You
stove.
check with him, Johnny.
You know that I like to talk. I never miss an occasion, to do so. But this is something he did that was very important. Just a few years ago, I noticed that had to do a little bit with Silver Glen in a way because we were looking at things and we had cases, big boxes of papers. Since we had CDC for management, they didn't want to keep all our papers, so every year they send us 2 huge boxes. And there was a room downstairs in this building, in the garage building, but a room that was full. You couldn't enter, it was full to the ceiling. There were those cases also in the social room, all over. And we know that they were all mixed up. They were not filed in any sort of way, but they had a year on the box with a pile of all kinds of papers. And I knew those were, in there were important papers. There were other papers that had to be shredded. But who knew what they were? Nobody except Ed, who would know what was precious and had to be kept. And so I asked Ed, we have to do something. And he said, yes, I'm worried about those papers. And he said, if you find a team for me, I'll do it. So that was a few years ago. We set up shop in the social room. And I got the first part of the team was his sister-in-law, Anna Lee. I asked her, she was part of our committee, of our group, I should say. And so I asked her if she would do that, and she said, yes, I would do that with Ed. And so then I offered my services, but I needed somebody who really knew what was going on. So I went to two people who had just a few months before come to us, and that's Kay and Neil. And so day after day after day, those people did, and they did most of the work, but Annalie and I and Ed, and of course Ed was the most important part because he knew every paper and he said, we must keep that. So now the papers are in what, 6 files? How many? Anyway, they're in locked files and they're all in order. And we know that we have those papers for the future that we would not have had not been for Ed.
Good.
Stand up and talk. Don't be bashful.
She was just gonna speak. She was just gonna speak.
Jim,
What?
would she like to sit down and talk?
No, I can stand. I stand well. I don't sit well. Okay, can you hear me? As I was sitting here listening to all you people, it reminded me of my husband's last month, and I thought, oh, I wish I could clone his gray and hard. Okay, I was just saying that last month of my husband's life, I wish that I could clone him, his brain and his heart for someone else. This, I get the feeling about Ed. And maybe, we hope he understood how much we all appreciated him. And all I can say is, tell others that you appreciate the work they're doing.
I have always respected Ed's love for detail, exactness, and precision. And this is somewhat the same theme of the other people who've spoken before me. I remember his telling the board about the need to cull through all the archives and how important it would be to save some papers. The lovely vignette I treasure is of new members, Kay May and Neil Alcott, working with Ed in the archives for 6 weeks. 2 generations at Silver Glen accomplished a most important mission.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, turn it on.
Back in 2001, my husband and I were dancing, and we met Ed, and this was at the senior center, and he said something about Silver Glen, and we both said, Silver what? Where is that? He said, it's the best kept secret in the world, but I'll tell you about it. And I said, okay. So he told us to come up here, and we did, and we met Phyllis Soubier, and she took us around and everything, and she said, this apartment right here you better get today or it'll be gone. And I said, yes, ma'am, and we did. And I'm certainly glad that we did. Because of those 2 people, I wouldn't be here now. And I want to thank Ed. And then later on, when Chuck wasn't feeling too well, he said one thing. He said, remember, If you have any questions or anything is bothering you, call Ed. Yes.
Guy's gonna speak. Guy's gonna speak.
I guess I'm the newest member that have worked with Ed. It started when I first came. They asked me if I would work on the pool. I thought they were talking about billiard pool. And then I found out after I worked field, we don't know where the equipments were. I was looking for the history. And Patsy helped me, Phil helped me, and Patsy said, call Ed. I told her, I said, I don't know Ed. So Patsy called for him. But then I still don't know him. So after a board meeting, Phil said, look, that is Ed. So I went over to Ed, I asked him, do you have information about equipment? He said, come over to my apartment. So at that minute, I went over with him. He went over his files in the computer, and he found the files. But then we're just trying to get it out. His daughter visited him, so we're interrupted. He said, I'll send it to you. So I went home. I waited for 2 days. Finally, he sent me a whole big file. But the file is called Panasonic Computer Printing. So I emailed back, I said, there's not a want. I want your file of what you have done. Because in the conversation, he told me he has worked on that for 2 to 5 years on all the maintenance and inventory. And he typed those in himself at night. He spent 2 years on it. So I said, do you have the data? He said, yes. So finally, I said, I don't want to know the Panasonic printer. So 2 days later, he sent me all his files, 23 of them. I still have it. And I'm using it. I use it to start with. He tried to do the maintenance thing, but in those days, you cannot do it online. So he does it himself on the computer. He entered all the data, and I have all his data. And I looked at it and I studied it. But that's how I come up with the maintenance program a year ago. And he has another huge file. It's called inventory. And I'm working on it. So I guess I'm the only one that is having his private file that he typed in.
I just want to say, although we didn't get to know Ed as much as we would have liked to, being fairly new, being a second generation, and my parents moved in here when Bobby and Ed did, and we heard so many good things about Ed, and came to know Ed as the voice of reason here at Silver Glen. He was like the engineer of a train that would keep the train on the tracks. And we appreciate everything that Ed and Bobby have done for Silver Glen. I really don't think if it had been for them, they hadn't been here, that Silver Glen would not be what it is today. So we're blessed to have had them here, and we will always remember Ed and be thankful that he was here.
When I was, Isa and I have only been here for about a little over a year now. And when I went to my first meeting, which was a wellness committee meeting, and was railroaded into the presidency or the chairmanship, I said, well, I don't know enough about Silver Glen to take this role. And I was immediately pointed towards Ed. So I went to Ed, and we must have spent 45 minutes together, and I thought, well, he must be reading off from something or other, and he was right up here. He didn't need a file or anything. He had a file right up here, and he, went through all of Silver Glen. It was wonderful, absolutely a whole history that was associated there. And since then, I found that there are a lot of founders here that have done wonderful things and that I rely on yet still today. The one sitting next to me, usually in the Wellness Committee, is my secretary. And she's there holding my hand, making sure I'm doing the right things. So I thank you all, and thank Ed especially, and Bobby.
Anybody else? Oh, here comes the newest board member.
Again, you've all talked about the contributions Ed has made to Silver Glen, and I do appreciate the contributions he has made too, and I've had a few sessions with him where I've talked with him and whatnot. But the one thing that is kind of missing from him, I had to ask him, Ed, you know, you put a lot of time in here. Do you do anything really for fun and enjoyment? And what I really found out was I never knew that, of course, Ed would like to work in the wood shop as well at one time, but he was also a wood carver, and he has done some really magnificent pieces of wood carving as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Speak now or forever hold your peace. We're remembering Ed today, and this little poem, I think, puts it all together. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of the winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. And in the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of the fall, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. And when we have joys to share, to learn, we remember him. So as long as we live, he too shall live in our hearts, because he's now a part of our community forever. Now I have one little challenge for you before you go, and then we're going to let you eat. Is it time? Are you ladies ready for the food? She doesn't answer me because she can't hear me. I read of a woman who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend, and she referred to the dates of her tombstone from the beginning to the end. And he noted that the first came his date of birth, and then she spoke the following date with tears. But she said, what mattered most was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that was spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved her, knowing what little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the case. What matters is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. So think about this, long and hard. Are there things that you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left. That still can be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before, if we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile. So when our eulogies are being read, with your life actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say, and how would you spend your dash?
Very good.
We appreciate your coming. They have glorious food for you. We thank the committee, it was headed by Jean Meyer, and there's a great representative. So get the food going, ladies.